All right, so thank you everyone for joining us for our COAD Network kickoff call. We're going to do 2 of these, and this is the first one. The second one will be on May 27th at, I believe, 6 p.m. And this is part of the IDHRC's effort to pull us together as a COAD to see what we can do to help strengthen all of our groups across the state throughout the year. Rick Wolfcole and I are going to kind of just talk through some things with you. Rick Wolfcole has been the co-chair of the IDHRC's COAD / long-term recovery committee, as well as myself. We've been co-chairing it for the last couple years, I want to say now. And going into this direction, we were hoping to start this COAD network last year. However, COVID pushed things off a little bit for us. So we're very excited to get started with this and really see where we can go with it. It's been in the making for a year and a half now, I would say, and I think has so much promise and potential with it. So moving us forward with it, just sort of our welcome, our purpose, where we're at, we want to explain the role of the IDHRC, which some of you have recently heard a little bit more about that in another presentation. Kind of lay out how the Iowa Disaster Human Resource Council, the IDHRC, works in conjunction with our local groups. And with that, we want to kind of start out by talking a little bit about the acronyms in place, and then also how all these groups can work together in the COAD network. So just to start with that, looking on the screen alone, there are, I think, 3 different acronyms in here, and we'll talk a little bit about all of them basically throughout just this little intro section. But to begin with, the Iowa Disaster Human Resource Council is the group that's pulling together this network that's comprised of a variety of different committees, and it's what we're going to start off with talking about. And then COAD is just that term that we're going to use to really define those groups that you're working with, whether you help do it as part of emergency management, or perhaps you're one of the entities within your group. It could be called on your end a disaster recovery committee or a long-term recovery group, a recovery coalition, perhaps, whatever you might call it, just to make it consistent so that we can all kind of talk about the same type of group together. We are going to use the word COAD. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about those long-term recovery groups, which we'll just refer to in the acronym of LTRG. And again, a lot of times you might be calling them something different, but just so that we're consistent together, we're going to use those terms within this network, but also in our conversation today. So as an overview, kind of to understand what the group is, what the Iowa Disaster Human Resource Council is, and kind of move us forward, this is a coalition essentially of a variety of different organizations who play a really great role in disaster preparedness, response, and recovery, to bring together those faith-based, the voluntary, the private, the public, as well with some government organizations, so that we can have a little bit more cohesion in steering some of those elements that might not be part of the standard emergency management plans. These groups can be really tremendous at helping with volunteer management coordination, identifying the unmet needs that are taking place in a community, and how those partners can work together. And so the IDHRC's role in that is to help bring those together across the state so that a community that might not be getting as much attention can bring that forward, and it can be a forum to share information back and forth. Kind of continuing along the acronym theme, another term for the IDHRC is Iowa's VOAD, which stands for Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. And it's part of a grander scheme with that. As you can see on here, it's also part of national VOAD, where there are VOADs in each of the different states across our nation. And they all do something kind of similar, but all very differently in how they approach it within each of their states. So in Iowa, we fill that role as a VOAD, but we just call ourselves the Iowa Disaster Human Resource Council. We also fill the role, if you're familiar with the Citizen Corps Council, through some of the conversations FEMA has had over the years and building some of those up, the IDHRC fills that as well. So it is essentially an umbrella organization of more than 65 different organizations who come together through all the phases of disaster to really help be a conduit for that information, the resources, the unmet needs. Just a little bit about the group. We are actually celebrating the IDHRC's 20th anniversary this year. It was initially formed in 2001 when the Iowa Emergency Management Association was interested in having some kind of a statewide level voluntary agency type group that can really help in disasters to kind of take that bit of the coordination piece and really focus on it. And so they came to the Iowa Department of Homeland Security to ask with help in creating that. And that's how the Iowa Disaster Human Resource Council was formed 20 years ago. And since that time, just a few things about it is that it has been recognized by National VOAD because of the structure and how it invests into the communities. And it's also had some really amazing members within it who have looked at not only how Iowa can be strengthened, but also nationally, how can we support each other? One of those was Don Hampton, who was recognized as a National VOAD Volunteer of the Year, and to whom we actually have the Don Hampton Conference coming up that some of you have heard about as well, that'll be taking place in 3 weeks. As well as our committees have been recognized as well. The Disaster Case Advocacy Committee received the Governor's Volunteer Award and putting out some guidance and best practices for case management. And there are a variety of other events with the IDHRC and recognitions that we could discuss more, but some just to kind of bring it to a forefront of what this group does and how effective can it be with that. I'll just talk about a few more things to put some of the perspective together of when we're talking about a VOAD or a COAD or a long-term recovery group. I was just talking about National VOAD as well. So if there are all these different groups who all kind of work in the same realm, what exactly does this structure look like? How do we work together through this? And how does your specific group fit into the picture? Well, really, all of these groups are aiming towards the same thing. They're all working to coordinate together, increase collaboration and communication. How can we work on the same, basically, foundation, the same framework, so that we aren't duplicating our efforts, that we aren't hindering what's happening with emergency management, that we can really just maximize what the outputs can be. But we all do that in these groups on a different kind of spectrum. So starting first from that long-term recovery group, those are going to be groups that are formed after disaster that are very specific to that specific disaster, right? They're going to be geographic specific to what that is. So whether it's a tornado going through multiple towns and then each town makes it, or whatever that might look like. But it is going to be specific to that disaster and how we can all coordinate together through that. The COAD level is going to branch out just a little bit past that. And so that's where each of you have been invited into this. We're going to think about your groups right here as these COADs, where these are groups that are existing past just that specific disaster. These are actually the groups that are kind of here year round to cover and discuss and plan for what's going to happen during a disaster, be able to respond faster when that happens, go through recovery, build, learn, enhance from there, and keep moving forward to get stronger and better so you can be more resilient within your community. So these are the ones year round that are there, which is why you've been invited. You're all kind of in that construct of that COAD, or perhaps you're at a long-term recovery, but you're maybe a long-term recovery that has sustained over a long period of time that's also kind of looking towards preparing as well. We're kind of looking at this part right here. Where the IDHRC fits in is looking at then across the state, being that collaborative entity that's there throughout the year, just like a COAD, 24/7, it's going to be there, and thinking about how we can enhance all of those elements together across the state. Again, looking at those faith-based community groups, the nonprofits, as well as the public side and the private as well, but looking in those other elements. And then nationally is that National VOAD, who tries to be that umbrella organization to provide supports to those state VOADs like the IDHRC, who can then help support our COADs and our long-term recovery groups. So that's kind of how the communication, the structure fits with all these, and where the acronym can be kind of helpful if we understand COAD and VOAD, sort of similar, but they're all covering that same piece together with that coordination, the collaboration, or cooperation pieces. So just one other element of what this group is with the IDHRC on here, it's 65 plus member organizations, as I mentioned, and I have some of those on the next page. And we're really looking, and this is where I think we have a lot where we connect in with COADs and long-term recovery groups, that we're looking to really maximize those public and those private resources together through the immediate and that long-term aspect of recovery, looking at all elements, the physical, the spiritual, the emotional needs, looking not just in one element of response, but across all components into recovery, into mitigation and preparedness, and whatever that might look like in each of the communities. And where we hope in this network we can be the most successful is hearing what it is you're needing in your areas, or helping explore new areas to help enhance this for whatever it might look like for you. To give a sampling, here is what our members look like within the IDHRC, that you can see just a variety, a nice range in there. 43% currently of our members fall under that nonprofit range. Faith-based falls under 16%, voluntary in that 13%, and then about 28% is governmental, and that includes our emergency management coordinators kind of fall under that realm a lot of times, in addition to a variety of different elements that can relate to public health and human services, a variety of different pieces in there with human rights as well. So a lot of those different pieces and kind of that representation, and that's what the IDHRC seeks to provide. So when it comes to how the IDHRC can support you, we want to continue to build our membership so we have a nice variety of resources and subject matter experts to be able to support you. And as far as, is there a place to get a copy of those who are members, or what they're able to offer? That's one of the things that we are working towards with this, or within the IDHRC. We're going through a new method of tracking this information to be able to pull out the resources that each of these can provide, to be able to provide kind of like a Rolodex of these pieces. So we hope to be able to have that in the coming months that we can roll out to you. In the meantime, anyone who's interested in getting connected in these partners, very happy to work through making those connections. So now moving a little bit more into the COAD network and where the IDHRC's COAD and long-term recovery support committee can kind of fit into this picture as well. This particular committee is the one that's launching the COAD network, and it's designed, you know, in its mindset to provide that assistance to communities or counties, regions, whatever that might be, to help in the formation of the COADs as well as sustaining them, whether that's under the term of COAD or VOAD, or if it's the long-term recovery group that's forming after a disaster, whatever it might be. So to help those organizations and forming and sustaining them, helping them stay viable during these times between disasters, which is a common thread that we have heard over the years, is how do we stay sustained during this time frame? What can that look like? Well, that's where our COAD network fits in. So here is just a glimpse, you know, of this committee, where Rick Wolf-Cole and I have kind of gone and are thinking with it, and what the committee is wanting to really put its interests. One of the things that the IDHRC has been able to provide over the last several years is a mapping of our current groups, whether they're called a COAD or a long-term recovery group. The one on the screen is going to be a little small for anyone to read, of course, but this is to give a picture of where we're at. And you guys are the ones listed as the contacts, or you've been brought in by whoever's listed as the contact to join this call. And so this is why we reached out to you specifically, is that we do have an understanding that you have a group that's formed. And the IDHRC tries to maintain this. So also when there are national groups that want to help support you in whatever your response or recovery might look like, we can connect them directly with you and help with that process, as well as something's happened in the community, we want to get connected, do something together, we can do that. The other thing that we have done in the past and continue to do is really look at that COAD and long-term recovery formation, the support and the guidance, and that's where our network comes into place. And we also try and be within this committee a single point of contact for you. So if you're trying to reach in with us to tell us about an unmet need that you have, a particular household that you're concerned about, that you're not sure if there's a resource that can help them with, you're trying to find the right partners to bring in, whatever that might be, that we can help be that communication and conduit back and forth with you. And so knowing that those have been things that we have done and we have confirmed back with us within our group that we continue to want to do these as well as some other focus areas, one of the next steps is to launch this COAD network and really build what this looks like for you. Over the years, the IDHRC has been asking each in your communities when something happens, what is it that you need? And we've been able to help connect with, let's say, templates or examples of policy documents from others and allow a variety of different documents or resources to pass through in different areas. But we want to take it one step forward based on the conversations we've had with many of you to provide what it is that you've been asking for the most, which is, well, how can I connect with another COAD? How can I connect with someone who has done this before? I've never done this before. Or how can I share my information? My community just went through a whole lot of work and we don't want another community to have to go through the same. How can we do that? And so we've heard for requests for central repository for resources. We've asked for toolkits to help in developing different pieces. Can we have more trainings and workshops? And so we want to bring that back out to you and say, okay, sure, we can help with these things. Let's connect together. Let's create this network to support each other. And then whatever we can do will be directly targeted to what you're needing in whatever place that you're at right now. So our focus areas for the committee, not the network, but our COAD committee, our COAD long-term recovery committee within the IDHRC is to go in this direction of helping develop a lot of these resources, to get more involved and engaged with you each, and make sure that we are also in a good place that we are directly supporting you when something is needed, whether that's informing a group, whether that's with providing tabletops, whatever that might look like. So these are the areas on the screen right now that the COAD long-term recovery group has been hearing from others, that these would be the areas that would be helpful. And so one of the first steps to move towards these is to engage and kick off our COAD network and continue to create those resources and pieces that are most helpful for you. And so I'm going to pause right there because this is really kind of concluding where we're at in a presentation style. I want to kind of just talk a little bit about some of the possibilities for where this COAD network can go. And again, I bring this as information that's been provided by many of you and many of others in the moment or after in reflection of, you know, what would really be nice is if we could have whatever X, Y, and Z might be. So with the COAD network, I have up here the committee chairs for Rick Wolfcole and myself. I think that Rick is continuing to stay on for a little bit, but he might take a step back, continue to be a part of the network, but you can still reach out to either Rick or myself. But where we would like to go next with the network is we're going to send out a survey that is really entirely about what do you want this network to look like. We're not asking you to do all the work. We're just kind of looking for what do you want? Do you want us to focus on types of training? Do you want to have more social opportunities and networking to talk with other COADs and groups that are out there? Are you looking for some specific resources? How much time would you like to have this group meet? Less frequently, more frequently? What kind of works for you and what your interests are, so then we can support what that would be. And so I kind of went through a lot of that pretty fast, wanted to give a little bit of an understanding at least of where this group is coming from. And I'm going to thank you. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop the recording for the moment and just kind of open up if you have any questions that you would like to express or anything more that we can talk about with it. And Rick, actually, is there anything you'd like to say first?
No, you've covered it very, very well, which I trusted you would. Especially having Sarah and Ashley on board. I see Ashley had sent out the link for the map and stuff, which helped, and great questions. So no, very, very well put. I just want to hear from others.
One thing I'll also add is I do see in our chat box a question before I stop our recording, a question about would this group also be able to provide training to recruited members of agencies where we are finding shortfalls. And as long as that is something within your COAD that's supportive of your directions, we might be able to either do that directly ourselves or help locate others. If it's something that requires, licensure, certification, some sort of expertise in there, we can help support finding those individuals who would have that. And one thing I'll also say, and I know this question's coming from emergency management, but in those types of things, we would connect in with the emergency management coordinator to be sure that whatever that direction is going in is not duplicative of something that's already happening there, just to ensure that there's solid communication between the two. But there's a good possibility that if we can't provide the training ourselves, we can go seek and look for opportunities of who might be able to provide that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause our webinar.